What's going on, guys? Dare here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another fantasy football video. Today, we are going over the top 5 breakout wide receivers. We're expecting each of these receivers to take a step forward for the 2020 season, and it's undeniable each of them bring in a massive amount of upside. Before we do get into the video though, stat of the day. Yesterday's stat of the day was which running back with at least 100 carries led the league in fantasy points per attempt. The correct answer was Austin Eckler. As for today's stat of the day, which quarterback with at least 5 red zone rush attempts led the league in yards per carry in the red zone? Leave your answer in the comment section down below. We'll be happy to let you know who wins in tomorrow's video. Just a reminder, we are having one extra episode a week. It's a Q&A. We are answering your questions that you submit on our website. This is available on Apple, iTunes, and Spotify. So if you are interested in one extra episode a week or want your question answered, consider checking us out there. Ratings and reviews definitely appreciated. While you're on the site submitting your questions, check out the perks of our draft package and be sure to check out some of the free tools and data we have available for anyone to access. With that out of the way though, let's hop into the first wide receiver, DJ Moore of the Carolina Panthers. And I understand he has already finished as the wide receiver 18 in half PPR leagues last season. His breakout isn't necessarily that he's going to be an every week starter. No, he's already established that. A breakout for DJ Moore is that he has the potential to finish as a top 5 wide receiver, and that's a pretty bold statement considering he's being drafted outside of the top 12. People aren't giving him enough credit for how successful he was through the final stretch of the season. He didn't play in week 17, and in week 16 he did only play in 9% of snaps, but the 7 games prior to that he was able to compile over 114 half PPR fantasy points. When taking a look at all wide receivers through their final 7 games, that would have ranked just behind Michael Thomas, Devontae Parker, who we all know went on a heater, as well as AJ Brown, who is in line for a similar type of breakout himself. So the real question we have to ask ourselves is not if he can do it, it's if he can repeat what he already did. And taking a look at the offense, I'd say the chances are pretty good. They rank 6th in vacated targets for the upcoming season. That means 155 total targets are on the table this season that in 2019 were distributed to other players. They did add in Robbie Anderson, who should compete with Curtis Samuel as one of the big play deep threat types of players, and it's very likely that certain times throughout the season we will see Robbie Anderson putting this team in a good position to score. Now it may not translate to fantasy points galore for Robbie Anderson, but more scoring opportunities are overall going to help and boost the production of DJ Moore. When looking at the player that he is, a guy that can finish 10th in receptions, 8th in receiving yards, post a top 10 contested catch rate, it's pretty disappointing when you see he ranked 43rd in receiving touchdowns for the 2019 season, because if that number were to be at a more reasonable level translated from the amount of receptions and receiving yards he had accumulated, adding another 2 to 4 touchdowns on an already somewhat successful season would have completely changed the outlook we have on DJ Moore for the upcoming year. Could he be someone like Julio Jones who has an allergy to the end zone? It's possible, but I'd much rather bank on a player who is coming from a season with very low touchdown totals rather than bank on the production of a player who exceeded the expected touchdown rate he should have had. The addition of Teddy Bridgewater is also a welcoming sign for this offense. Say what you want about Bridgewater and his conservative tendencies, but Kyle Allen was pitiful when it came to red zone quarterback rating, an area Teddy Bridgewater easily ranked inside the top 10 at while he was a fantasy starter. We do have to give him a small knock for playing with Michael Thomas, one of the best receivers, if not the best receiver in the league, but considering that Kyle Allen ranked 48th in quarterback rating in that area of the field, it's almost a guarantee we should expect some better performance from Bridgewater in this area. If that isn't enough to convince you, how about letting you know that the Carolina Panthers passed at the 4th highest rate in the league? Definitely a trend looking to continue with the pass-friendly offense on the back of Christian McCaffrey. They ran the 5th most total plays in the league. They throw the ball more than most any other team in the league. They're near the top of the league in vacated targets and rank 31st in points allowed. So they're allowing a ton of points. And did I mention they just lost Luke Kuechly? So guys, he's definitely a player we could see taking a big step into that next tier of wide receivers. But let's move on to the next player. The next breakout wide receiver we have is Calvin Ridley of the Atlanta Falcons. When looking at players and trying to see who fits the perfect mold of a breakout, there is no better example than that of Calvin Ridley. You have a wide receiver with a first-round draft pedigree on one of the pass-heaviest offenses, stepping into a major role heading into the 3rd year, which is typically the breakout year of wide receivers. Think Chris Godwin a year ago, similar similar situation, stepping into that wide receiver 2 role, showing improvement in each season leading up to that, and then completely popping off in his third year. That's exactly what Calvin Ridley is expected to do for this upcoming season. His draft capital doesn't currently reflect that. The price to get him more reflects what he did last season, which is almost guaranteed to increase. The Atlanta Falcons rank first when it comes to vacated targets, so there is a massive opportunity share up for grabs in Atlanta. The grand total is 258 total targets, so even with the addition of pass catching running back Todd Gurley and the acquisition of Hayden Hurst, even statting those players out for significant roles in the passing game still leaves plenty of targets left over to be distributed to Calvin Ridley, a player who has historically been very efficient on his targets, and the best part about it is there is a massive opportunity share open in the red zone. That opportunity share continues to increase as they inch closer to the end zone, including losing 56.2% of their total targets inside the 10-yard line, leaving an additional 18 targets in the green zone up for grabs this upcoming season. Yes, Hayden Hurst is a sleeper in the later rounds, but he's still unproven, and Julio Jones struggles in that area of the field, so would it surprise anybody if they lean on the receiver who has caught 17 touchdowns in his first 2 NFL seasons? It shouldn't surprise anybody. He definitely has double-digit touchdown upside. What sort of breakout list would we have without including DK Metcalf of the Seattle Seahawks? The case for Metcalf is very simple. While he didn't put up astounding numbers in 2019, he didn't break that 1,000-yard receiving mark, a mark that we've had a luxury of becoming accustomed to with several wide receivers in recent classes. No, he did reach 900 yards and 7 touchdowns, but to understand how elite that actually is, consider the fact that he's one of only 8 players, 22 years or younger, to have compiled 900 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns in his first NFL season since the year 2000. So 8 other receivers have been able to do that, Metcalf being one of them so young. You don't need me to tell you how freaky of an athlete this guy is. 6'4", 230 pounds. We're talking about the Derrick Henry of wide receivers, and a Derrick Henry that runs with 4.3 speed. The dude is a freak of an athlete. Yes, an underdeveloped product coming out of the draft, but his limited route tree held him back in no ways in 2019. The majority of the routes that he ran did come from a combination of just 3 different types of routes, but there were still routes he found a lot of success in. It should in no way hold him back in 2019. In fact, he should be able to build upon his limited skill set, and we've already seen receivers like Brandon Cooks play at very high levels for fantasy football, despite only being relied on for a handful of routes. Cooks also proved to do this on several different NFL teams, and Metcalf has one of the best quarterbacks in the entire league throwing him the ball. The Seattle Seahawks offense does tend to end up being a more backyard style of football approach from time to time, large in part to a combination of their poor offensive line and Russell Wilson's ability and willingness to scramble. He does it very effectively, and this is also an area where Metcalf excelled in 2019. He proved to be an outlet on several occasions for Russell Wilson, and when a play breaks down and you need to make something out of nothing, relying on the big-bodied receiver with 4.3 speed is not only the best approach, it was a successful approach for Russell Wilson last season. The only real criticisms you could give to Metcalf are potential volume concerns on what has been a run-first offense, and with Chris Carson leading the way and injured Rashad Penny likely starting on the pup, the health does have to be a concern. If anything were to happen and this team had to start with Carlos Hyde out there, I don't think he would have much, if any, success running behind this poor offensive line. All signs would lead to more volume in the passing game. Russell Wilson, known to be one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the league when converting pass attempts into touchdowns, as seen by his ranking of 23rd in attempts in 2019, yet ranking 6th in passing yardage, 3rd in passing touchdowns, and even the year before that, 4th in passing touchdowns despite ranking 20th in attempts. This is an area he ranks 9th in all time. These past seasons are not a fluke. This offense isn't going to need a ton of volume, so you can guarantee DK Metcalf is in line to get the full Russell Wilson experience for 2020. The next breakout wide receiver we have is Darius Slayton of the New York Giants, and I have mentioned him in previous videos as a good value where he's going for obvious reasons, mostly spinning the narrative that he could be the only healthy receiver on the field by the fantasy playoffs. And while that is true, I do want to spin some other light on it to give some of you guys some faith in his involvement potentially early on in the season. If you can think back to the beginning of the 2019 season when they went ahead and took Golden Tate to pair with Sterling Shepard, it really left a lot of us wondering, what is this team going to do with two mainly slot receivers? Are they pushing Sterling Shepard outside? And yes, that did ultimately happen, but Sterling Shepard's skill set is better tailored for the slot position. He still played 40+% of his snaps from the slot. Golden Tate, an old dog, he's not learning any new tricks. He played over 70% of his snaps from the slot. When there's receivers battling to get on the field, there's only one player I can think of that this team looks for when filling that outside receiver role, and that's Darius Slayton, a player who played only 4.5% of his snaps from the slot, a player who's faster than Robbie Anderson. He has 4.39 speed, a player proven to be dynamic in college, averaging over 20 yards per reception. But even with that, the Giants themselves ran just under 73% of their offensive plays out of 11 personnel, which means 3 wide receivers are on the field at the same time. Only one other team in the league ran that play formation at a more frequent rate, but that just goes to show you that Darius Slayton can be an early contributor for the team. He doesn't need all of these injuries to happen to the pieces around him in order to be successful. He arguably has the best connection with second-year quarterback Daniel Jones, a quarterback who Vegas has an over-under of 3,800 passing yards. That's not too shabby of an overall market share available for Darius Slayton playing as the primary outside receiver. This is an offense that was 7th in pass plays per game last year. That's on the back of a season where they were without several of their pass-catching weapons for significant portions of the season. So Darius Slayton not only has the makings of a potential early season breakout, but his ceiling increases each week as the season progresses. Let's move over to the final breakout candidate, which is Will Fuller. He's the only one on this list that I can't say is a must-own because, guys, let's be real. Can this guy finish a season? We have never seen that before. But if he does, hear me out, if he does, and Brandon Cooks looks anything like the receiver we saw last season, or he gets another concussion and is out, Will Fuller undeniably has some of the highest upside in the entire league. We're talking about a player who not only had the highest fantasy performance of the entire year in 2019, week 5 against Atlanta, catching 14 of 16 targets for 217 yards and 3 touchdowns. I went back through the past 10 seasons. No fantasy receiver ever eclipsed that total in any single given week. Not even Julio Jones in 2016 in that incredible 300-yard game against Carolina. Unfortunately, he only reached pay dirt once and was short by 2 touchdowns on what Will Fuller was able to do this past season. And reaching the end zone scoring for Will Fuller is nothing new. We've seen stretches in the past of him doing this successfully. Deshaun Watson in his rookie season came out on a tear before ironically tearing his ACL in a 4-game stretch in 2017. Will Fuller through just 4 games caught an astounding 7 touchdowns. 3 of those 4 games were multi-TD games. DeAndre Hopkins was a 150+ target receiver for this offense. Brandon Cooks has never garnered that type of target market share in any offense he's been on. Randall Cobb has come in to soak up some of those targets across the middle from the slot, but is it even possible if Will Fuller's healthy and on the field for him not to see career highs in targets? He easily has the best connection with Deshaun Watson now with DeAndre Hopkins out of the picture, and he's going at a stage of the draft where if he does end up busting, it's not going to overall kill your team. The safety at a lot of the wide receivers going in the early rounds can more than make up for the fact that you have to leave him on the bench or potentially even risk starting him early on in the season while you can guarantee that he's healthy. So for roster compositions that are fine to assume that type of risk, Will Fuller can definitely be your guy. I can't necessarily classify him as a must-own because if I were to take bets on how many games Will Fuller is going to play this year, whatever number you told me, I'd probably take the under. But when assessing all mid to late round wide receivers and their ranges of outcomes, it's hard to find a player with as much upside as Will Fuller in 2020. But guys, that's going to do it for our video today. Let us know in the comments section which players you have as must-own breakout wide receivers. If you did enjoy this video, how about hitting that like button? If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. We thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.